Justly Johnson and Kendrick Scott sit in prison, slapped with a murder charge. The two 20-somethings accused of gunning down Lisa Kindred minutes into Mother's Day. Shot through the heart with her 3 small children just a few feet away. But did Detroit cops get the right guys?
I'm 1,000% sure that my brother didn't do it. I will put my life on the line for that.
Raynette Johnson, Justly Johnson's sister, says her brother and his buddy Kendrick Scott were party boys, not killers.
Why? What was their motive? They had no motive. Both of them boys was mama boys. So anything that they wanted, they could have went to their moms. It was no robbery. They didn't take her purse. They didn't take no money. He knew better. He would have been in trouble. Not from the police, but just from my mama. She wouldn't have been playing that.
Tell us about your brother.
He just wasn't capable of anything like this. You know, he wasn't a criminal. He didn't do anything. He had no previous record. You know, he just randomly picked up and just accused of a crime.
Cops claim the motive was a carjacking, but nothing was stolen.
What's strange to you, Raynette, when somebody says it was a carjacking, usually a car is gone?
A car is gone, or mostly when it's a carjacking, they see kids. Either they putting you out the car. That whole ordeal was crazy.
Why do you think your son ended up behind bars?
You know, I just don't know. I used to believe in justice, but not anymore.
Police say these two witnesses, Raymond Jackson and a teenager named Antonio Burnett, fingered Justly and Kendrick after overhearing them talking about a botched robbery.
That's all the evidence they had. There was no physical evidence. He sees a guy.
Local investigative reporter, now private investigator Scott Lewis, covered the story for our Detroit affiliate, WXYZ. From the very beginning, he too wondered if Detroit police rushed to judgment.
I was a journalist for, 35 years, and I think I'm a pretty objective guy, and I don't see anything that points to these guys.
But a judge and jury believed the witnesses, sentencing Justly and Kendrick to life in prison with no parole.
My brother was not like that. And for them to just take his life basically and just throw the key away because somebody said something and they went on that, that's crazy.
Scott begins to investigate the case himself. He conducts a jailhouse interview with Justly Johnson and is shocked when Justly tells him his alibi is actually Antonio Burnett. Yep, the same guy who ratted Johnson out to police.
If Antonio was your alibi witness, why didn't he just, when the police picked him up, say right away, I was with Justly and Mike?
The only thing I could place to it was intimidation and fear.
And so you believe that they put so much pressure on Antonio Burnett and Raymond Jackson that they just lied?
Yes, I do.
I think what happened here is the prosecutor and the police took a square peg and pounded into a round hole. And as a result, we've got 2 innocent guys sitting in prison for life.
That's what I'm looking for right there.
So Scott asked a friend, who just so happens to be a former Detroit homicide detective, Michael Carlisle, to look over the 300-page case file and 400 pages of court transcripts.
My first impression was there's 2 people in prison that shouldn't be there. This is one of the worst cases I've ever seen.
Michael says it's page after page of shoddy police work, beginning with the idea Lisa's murder started as a carjacking.
I laughed when I read that. City of Detroit, weapon of choice, and all the street crimes that are committed are basically done with a 9mm 40 caliber weapon or an assault type weapon. In my 10 years in homicide, I've only had 2 cases where 22 caliber was used, and they were both domestic violence cases.
Michael also discovers the ear witnesses, Antonio Burnett and Raymond Jackson, had prior records, and according to the reports, had consumed 32 beers and 10 joints between them the night Lisa was murdered.
I would say this, I can only use myself as an example. If I drank 32 beers, try to wake me up in 2 days.
Records also reveal Justly took a polygraph test and passed. But Carlisle says the biggest blunder? Police didn't bother to perform a standard gunpowder residue test on either man.
They could have exonerated Kendrick and Justly with a gunshot residue test, and it wasn't done. Shame on the police. They went down every wrong turn in this investigation from the very beginning. And why nobody stopped them along the way, very poor police work. And I would tell them to their faces to this day, because I know the people involved.
If police did arrest the wrong men, then who really did kill Lisa Kindred and why? Scott receives a letter from Lisa's aunt that may hold all the answers.
The moment I heard on Sunday morning that Lisa had been murdered, my first thought was that Will, did it. We begged her not to go back with him after he broke down the bathroom door and beat the crap out of her. It's disturbing.
Oh my gosh, it's beyond disturbing.
Will Kindred was cleared the night his wife was murdered. But Scott's investigation uncovers a dark secret. Lisa had filed for divorce a year earlier. And records reveal, cops were called to Will and Lisa's house a staggering 17 times for domestic violence.
Paint the picture of what you're talking about.
He assaulted Lisa in the bathroom, and then when she was on the way to the police station, he pulled up next to her in the car and said, "I ought to take you and the entire family out." And on 2 occasions, the police, when they went there for domestic incidents, confiscated .22 caliber guns. Lisa was murdered with a .22 caliber weapon.
Lisa has a sister who was a police officer, and she informed the homicide section that her sister told her that if anything ever happens to me, William's going to be the person responsible.
Sadly, Lisa wasn't Will's only target of abuse. Court records show Will was convicted twice for abusing Lisa's then 8-year-old son, CJ.
There was one report where he picked CJ up off the bed and threw him against the wall.
Will Kindred refused Crime Watch Daily's request for an interview. Scott did talk to him, but Will would not sit down for a formal interview with him either.
Of course, he denied that he had anything to do with it. And I said, well, why are they saying that you're the most obvious suspect? And he said, well, I get it, because I did have some problems with domestic violence, but I've totally changed my life. I'm a different person now.
Family members say Will was in his mom's house when the fatal shot was fired. Police cleared him immediately after questioning. But Michael Carlisle says they should have done a background check.
I believe William is involved. William did not pull the trigger himself. I believe he supplied a weapon to one of the young kids with the promise of some money.
Authorities refuse to talk with us about this case, and Will Kindred has never been charged in connection with his wife's murder. In fact, Scott's investigation found just 33 days after the murder, Will collected Lisa's life insurance policy.
One of the things he said that I thought was very odd, I said, how much life insurance did you get when Lisa died? And he said, I don't recall. I said, what, you don't recall? Well, it must have been a significant amount of money. He says, yeah, and how much? Well, I can't really remember. If I got a big payoff on an insurance settlement, I think I'd remember how much it was.
To a T.
To a T.
Scott is now convinced these 2 guys got a bum rap, and he's on a mission to set them free.
I thought, there's got to be something in there that I could find that would get these guys out of prison. And I saw that there was one of the kids in the car, he was actually 8.5. I don't see anything in here that says they interviewed this kid.
Next, Scott finally tracks that kid down.
Did you see the person who did this?
Yes.
Could you identify them?
Yes.